And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Friday morning's flying weather. Got some IFR up here over the eastern and central Arctic coast. Not too bad in the interior. Some areas of marginal VFR. Pretty more widespread though here over the southwest interior areas. And then some IFR here down across the Pribilof Islands from near St. Lawrence Island to the Alaska Peninsula. And most of the Aleutians in an IFR zone there. Another zone of IFR here coming up near Kodiak Island and then across the Barren Islands up into Kamishak Bay and to about Port Muller or so, Seldovia, possibly IFR to start the day Friday. Narrow band of IFR along the North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle. And then for the afternoon, we got the southern southeast coast showing some VFR flying there. Marginal VFR to the north, Gulf of Alaska, IFR. Some IFR now over the Brooks Range area as well as the Arctic coast. And out here to the west, a lot of IFR for the Bering Sea. Marginal VFR into the inland areas here, Seward Peninsula, Nulato Hills, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, but Bristol Bay, mostly VFR. And for Saturday morning, big area a big area of IFR here covering the Bering Sea there from the Bering Strait all the way down to the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay to Kodiak Island, VFR. In fact, most of interior Alaska, VFR, so a little bit of marginal VFR along the western Alaska range, and then some IFR here along the North Gulf Coast, mostly south of Prince William Sound, over to about Yakutat or to the south there, and then marginal VFR for the southeast coast. And for the afternoon, marginal conditions continue for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast here. IFR possible, western Cook Inlet up to the Alaska Range, Kuskokwim Valley there, and the lower Yukon River valleys, looking mostly VFR down into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and eastern interior areas right up to the Brooks Range. Good flying there. Then you get into the IFR from the North Slope in the Arctic coast, and that comes around the bend there through the Bering Strait down onto the Yukon Delta coastline. A lot of marginal VFR here over the Bering Sea, but from about Nikolsky westward to the Komodorskis, IFR. And for the passes, both Anatuvik and Atigan becoming IFR at some point in the day tomorrow. And for the western Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill looking rather marginal. Same forecast for rainy. Marginal VFR early on, then becoming VFR for both Windy and Isabel, with Mentasta should be VFR the entire day on Friday. Tanita starting out marginal, becoming VFR. And Portage, marginal VFR, becoming IFR, some moisture working in from the southeast. And Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels here, about 4,000 feet across southern Alaska, 4 to 5,000 feet to the north there, and then 4 to 8 or 9,000 feet down across the Panhandle. And then quite a gradient here, you can see up to 12,000 feet just south of the Aleutians. And for icing, that next system here pulling eastward will spread moderate rime icing from the central Aleutians into across the eastern Aleutians there to close to False Pass during the afternoon hours or toward evening. Otherwise, another zone here of some kind of widespread, considerable moderate rime icing, south central Alaska and the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, over to Yakutat, and mainly the northern Panhandle. And for the 33,000 foot wind flow chart here, kind of a pretty good jet coming across the southern Bering Sea there, mostly out of the west, 130 to 140 knots, and then diving southeastward here just south of Kodiak Island, and then southwest flow at about 65 to 80 knots into the southeast coast. 9,000 feet south becomes southeast at about 50 knots through this area ahead of this low over the western Gulf of Alaska, and then northwest 40 knots across the Alaska Peninsula, 85 knot winds there just south of the central Aleutians, and at 3,000 feet, this low center far enough to the south that the strongest winds will stay south of the Aleutian chain there with that. And we got 45 to 50 knot winds out of the southeast for the North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, right into Kamishak Bay, northwest 40, cutting just south of Kodiak Island. And for turbulence, look for some isolated moderate turbulence here, Cook Inlet from Iliamna Lake eastward to about just west of Yakutat, and also here for the eastern and then west central Aleutian areas.